bedfellows or former bedfellows are the principal parts of this problem. I mean, they're the gods and goddesses on this landscape. I'm thinking of someone like Candace Owens, who's quite literally trafficking in blood libels now on her incredibly popular podcast. I mean, she's just gone berserk as far as the consequences of my argument is that it's possible to be wrong. It's possible to actually have false beliefs about what is in fact better or worse. You can be confused.
Well, I also think you're insufficient. You're insufficiently pessimistic. Twitter is that it operates by game rules that not only don't apply in the real world, but that when exported to the real world, pathologize it. Well, Mr. Harris, it looks like it's time for our approximately annual conversation.
Yeah, nice. You're the clock that ticks once a year.
Yeah, well, I suspect that's more than enough. So tell me what you're thinking about lately, Sam, on the intellectual side and what you're doing.
Well, it is actually relevant to the chaos in our politics at the moment. I'm increasingly worried that we have effectively rendered ourselves ungovernable based on the way we have shattered the information landscape. And I think independent media of the sort that we're indulging now is part of that problem. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but I've been fairly vociferous in criticizing some of our mutual friends, and in my case, some may be former friends, but fellow podcasters and people in independent media, and I just think they've been part of this shattering, and it's been fairly obvious. And the cases are different, but many people have been quite irresponsible in the way that they have platformed people uncritically and let them spread truly divisive and dangerous misinformation. I mean, I'm thinking especially of in the aftermath of October 7th and the global explosion of anti-Semitism. We've had some very big podcasts like Tucker's and Joe's platform Holocaust deniers and revisionists. And it's been quite insane out there. And it's just, I mean, that's just one piece of it. I mean, you can talk about COVID or Trump or Ukraine or, I mean, pick your ugly object out there. There's just a radical divergence of opinion into these echo chambers we build for ourselves, and it seems to be very difficult to cross political lines. I mean, it's somehow deeper than politics, actually. So anyway, I'm just increasingly worried about that, and I'm trying to hold up my side of the conversation in ways so as to cross those lines. But I'm just noticing that it's in many cases it's proving impossible.
Yeah, okay. Well, I am aware of that. It's actually part of the reason I thought it would be useful for us to talk today. So I want to think about how to respond to that to begin with. Well, I think the first thing that we should probably note is that this is a consequence of hyperconnectivity and stunning ease of communication, right? So, I mean, it's obviously the case that the landscapes of communication that once held us together, for better or worse, are now so multiplicitous that they're numberless. And so what does that mean? I think what it means in part, and this is where I think our conversation might get particularly interesting, is that we don't have a shared story anymore. And I think a culture is literally a shared story. And a story is a structure. This is, been part of our ongoing discussion for a very long period of time, right? The relationship between the perceptual framing that is constituted by a story and, let's say, the domain of objective facts, right? This is a very thorny problem. But it seems to me that you have a culture when people share the same story or the same stories. They have the same shared reference points. And with an infinite landscape of communication, that fragments indefinitely. And then no one, see, Sam, let me tell you, I might as well, just to annoy you, just to get just to get the ball rolling, I spent a lot of time thinking about the story of the Tower of Babel. And there's two stories in Genesis that describe how things go wrong. And one story is the flood, and that's the consequence of absolute chaos bursting forth, essentially. But the Tower of Babel is a story about both totalitarianism and fragmentation. So what happens is the engineers get together, because that's who it is. It's the city builders, the tool makers, those who create weapons of war, the city builders, the engineers. They get together and they build these towers for the aggrandizement of the local potentates. So there was competition in the Middle East of that time to build the highest tower for the glory of the local ruler. And that presumption, so you can think about that as misaligned aim on the sociological front. The consequence of this misaligned aim is a kind of, because the aim of the culture is wrong. Words themselves lose their meaning. That's what happens in the story, right? Everybody ends up speaking a different language, and then the towers fall apart. So it's because the story that's being told is one of human self-aggrandizement. That's part of it. And the culture pathologizes and then disintegrates. And so I see that happening in our culture. There's a technological element of it, obviously, that technological utopians are driving this. The transhumanists are driving this. And we're aiming at the wrong goal. And the consequence of that is that our language is falling apart and we don't share the same reference points. That's part of what's happening. So I'm curious about what you think about that, how that fits in with your concern, your emergent concern. Like, when you say fragmentation, Sam, what is it that you think is fragmenting? Because it's not the objective view of the world precisely, although the scientific enterprise even seems to be shaky and corrupt and falling apart in many ways.
Sam Harris is right. We're living through an epistemic collapse. What used to unify people, shared language, basic facts, reliable institutions, is breaking down. And no, religion isn't the answer. In fact, religion was the original disinformation system. It thrived on dogma, silenced dissent, and punished anyone who questioned the narrative. Christianity, for example, burned scientists alive for challenging biblical cosmology, like Giordano Bruno, and banned books that contradicted scripture. Fast forward to today. Digital media has inherited that same structure, but without even pretending to aim for truth. Algorithms on platforms like X and TikTok amplify lies faster than facts. A 2018 MIT study found that falsehoods on Twitter spread 6 times faster than the truth and reach far more people. So when Peterson talks about a loss of shared stories, he's not wrong that something's breaking. But the answer isn't to go back to religious myth. Religious stories might have unified people, but they did it by force, not reason. What we need now isn't myth. It's a commitment to verifiable evidence, transparency, and a culture that values truth over comfort. Religious certainty helped build the tower. Social media lit the match. And reason is the only thing that can stop the collapse.
Well, so I agree with that. I think the analogy to Babel is quite apt. And I don't think bringing Doge into Babel would have helped much. I think it is technological. Yes, I mean, there's just the fact that there's, because of I think largely this is a story of social media, but it's really the internet generally, because of the information technology we have built, people can find endless confirmation of whatever their cherished opinion is, and it's no longer there's some cultural immune system that has been lost, right? If you had to go to the physical conference out in the real world to meet the other people who were sure they've been abducted by UFOs. Well, then you would be meeting these people. You would see the obvious signs of dysfunction in their lives, and there'd be more friction to the maintenance of this new conviction, just based on the collision with other ancillary facts that have social relevance to you. But online, I mean, again, this even precedes social media. This is true of the internet back in the late 90s. You can just go down a rabbit hole and find endless confirmation that's fairly anonymized, right? The 20-minute documentary that blew your mind and convinced you that the World Trade Center towers were brought down by the Bush administration. You didn't know that it was made by some 18-year-old in his mother's basement, and you didn't have to know that. You were just looking at the product online. But if you had to meet this person, all of a sudden you'd realize that this is the maintenance of this fiction becomes quite a bit harder. So we're living now, I think, in the second generation of that moment where it really is bottomless. I mean, the ocean of misinformation and half-truth and misunderstanding is bottomless. And the tools we have built to rectify misunderstandings and to spot lies and to be better truth seekers are there, but they have been, in some sense, this is asymmetric warfare. They're no match for the information waste product that can be produced more quickly, right? I mean, this is just the old
Well, it's
problem.
easier to produce noise than signal, obviously.
Right. Or pseudo signal. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that purports to be signal, right? I mean, again, this is probably socially more inconvenient for you than it is for me. But I mean, many of your bedfellows or former bedfellows are the principal parts of this problem. I mean, they're the gods and goddesses on this landscape. I'm thinking of someone like Candace Owens, who's quite literally trafficking in blood libels now on her incredibly popular podcast. I mean, she's just gone berserk as far as I can tell. And yet, what is the style of conversation that would disconfirm all of that for her audience? At this point, I don't know, because I think what's happened is we've trained up a culture of people or cultures of people that simply don't care about facts. Really, they want a story that aligns with their, in some sense, their confirmation bias. I mean, they have certain things they want to believe. There's certain ideas they like the taste of, and then they just want people catering to that appetite, and there's a good business in that.
Sam Harris is right. The collapse of shared truth isn't a spiritual crisis, it's an information crisis. Social media didn't just fragment our attention, it rewired how people form beliefs. A 2020 RAND study showed that exposure to false information online actually reduces people's ability to discern fact from fiction, even when they know better. Peterson points to the Tower of Babel myth as if shared belief systems once protected us. But Christianity did the opposite. It punished critical thinking, banned books, and burned people alive for questioning authority. That wasn't unity, it was control through fear. What we're seeing today isn't the failure of secularism. It's what happens when we let emotion and ideology replace critical thinking again, just like religion always did. People follow influencers the way they once followed priests. Not because what they say is true, but because it feels good to believe it.
There's a couple of things I'd like to investigate here first. The first is I'd like to return to something that you and I talked about that we wandered around a fair bit in our previous conversations. You had, partly because you were concerned about the distinction between good and evil, and don't let me put words into your mouth, you were hoping to find a objective basis for morality, a way of grounding morality in the objective world. And I have a thought about that that's relevant to our current conversation. So tell me if you accept this proposition. Part of the pathology of Twitter is that it operates by game rules that not only don't apply in the real world, but that when exported to the real world, pathologize it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that a lot.
Okay. Right. Okay. So here's a way of I think bridging a gap between the way you've been thinking about the world from the moral perspective and the way I've been thinking about it. So, I've always been, I've understood that you had a very deep concern about moral judgment, and that your attempt to provide a scaffolding of objectivity for morality was grounded in that even deeper concern. And I thought that I could understand why you did that. And I didn't agree with the conclusions that you'd drawn, but I agreed with the overall enterprise. And it struck me recently, and I think we've already obliquely made reference to it in our conversation, that there's another way of conceptualizing this relationship between morality and objective fact, and that might be more fruitful to look into the realm of something like, well, it's like theory of iterability, and generalizability. It's maybe a variant of something like game theory. Like, imagine that. So let me give you an example, Sam, and it's a pretty famous example. You know those trading games where behavioral economists sit people down and say, two people, they say, I'll give you $100, you have to make an offer to the, okay.
Yeah.
So the finding across culturally is that people generally approximate a 50% split, right?
Yeah. And they're highly, they're not game theoretic with respect to unfair trades. Like they don't want to accept unfair trades even when it would just narrowly be to their advantage to accept them.
Exactly. Okay. And that's true even if they're poor. So if you put a poor person in a situation where they have to accept an unfair trade that would be to their immediate economic benefit, they seem even less likely to accept it. Now, I think the right way to construe that is that if you and I engage in an economic trade, we're doing two things at the same time. The first is what the classical economists would say is we're trying to maximize our gain, let's say. But the problem with that notion is that we aren't playing one game. Or while we're playing one game, we're also setting ourselves up to play a very large and unpredictable sequence of games. Those are happening at the same time. And so we don't want to just optimize for gain in the single game. We want to optimize our status as players in a large series of unpredictable games. And so we want to put ourselves forward as fair players so that people line up to play other games with us. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then imagine that the hallmark of morality is something like generalizable iterability across contexts, right? Because this would allow for, and so you could think about a truly moral system is the most playable game, and an immoral system augurs in. And when we're talking about this to some degree with regard to X, because our proposition is that fundamentally, because it's optimizing for short-term attention grip, and it benefits the psychopaths and the short-term gain accruers, the parasites, and perhaps the predators, that it's fundamentally a non-playable game, and that if its consequences generalize outside the world of X, that it pathologizes the environment. And the reason for that is it's not optimally iterable. And so the pattern of morality that would be grounded in the objective world isn't in the world of objective fact. It's in the world of optimized iterability across people and contexts.
Well, I would just say that there's some set of objective facts that subsumes that picture, right? I mean, the world is the way it is. The social world of social primates such as ourselves is the way it is. It admits of certain possibilities, and certain other things are impossible given the kinds of minds we have. Our minds could change in all kinds of ways. They could change by being integrated with technology. They could change by, genetically being manipulated at some point in the future. There's this landscape of possible experience that the right sort of minds could navigate. And we're someplace on that landscape, and we're trying to find our way. And so I view morality as at bottom, a navigation problem, right? And it's got this iterative quality that you describe. The question is, it's always, where can we go from here? Where should we go from here? Where should we go from here, given all the possible places we might go from here, both individually and collectively?
Okay, well, the reason that I got obsessed with stories to begin with, Sam, was because I realized 30 years ago that a story was a description of a navigation strategy. That's what a story is. And so then the question is, okay, let's see if we can formalize this a bit more. The story has to, let's say an optimized story has to iterate and improve. So for example, if you construe your marriage properly, it exists stably, but that's not as good as it could get. It could exist stably and improve as it iterates. And then you can imagine that there's a small world of games that are playable in the actual natural and social world that improve as they iterate. And those games, pointers to that game, those games are moral pointers. And I think that that's what the core of the religious enterprise dives into and elaborates upon. I think that's what makes it the religious enterprise, is that it deeply assesses. So, if imagine this, imagine that your proposition, the proposition you laid out is accurate, is that the fundamental concern is navigation. How do we get from point A to point B? Well, a story, you can think about this and tell me what you think, but I believe that a story is a description of a navigation strategy. If you go see a movie, you infer the aim of the protagonist and you adopt his perceptual frame and his emotional perspective. That's how perception works. And then you can imagine that there are depths of games. Some are shallow, and short-term games that maximize for short-term gain and to hell with everything else are shallow. And games that are sophisticated can be played in many situations with many players. They take the future into account and they improve as you play them. And there's a hierarchy of value in consequence of that is obliquely associated with the world of fact, because it has to operate in the world of fact, but that isn't fundamentally derived from data that's directly associated with the facts.
Well, not operationally, but potentially so. Just not in fact. That's just not. I'm never claiming when I say that there are objective truths to all of these questions, that those objective truths will be delivered by some guy holding a clipboard wearing a white lab coat. But there are things we just know to be true, and it would take a lot of explaining to get to the bottom of how we know them to be true. But I mean, they're very simple claims. We know that life in the best and most refined and most ethically positive sum developed world context, right? You and me and our most conscientious friends at the nicest resort after having done a great day's work, we're enjoying a great meal and talking and creatively and positively about how to improve the world. We know that's a better game than trying to find some child soldiers to torture the neighbors in some malarial hellhole in sub-Saharan Africa, and so that we can extract some heavy metals, the extraction of which is polluting the environment and causing the life expectation to be 30 years lower than it is in where we live, right? I mean, so like they're fundamentally discordant human projects that are available to some very lucky people and unavailable to others, and luck is by no means evenly distributed in this world. So there are better and worse games, right? By any measure of better, you want to, ethically better, or artistically better, entrepreneurially better, economically better. It's just better with respect to the health outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all trying to play the best game we can be a part of. We're all trying. I mean, some people. I take that back. Many of us are. We're all trying to play the best game we can think of as best, but one of the consequences of my argument is that it's possible to be wrong. It's possible to actually have false beliefs about what is in fact better or worse. Yeah, like you can be confused.
I also think you're insufficient. You're insufficiently pessimistic too, Sam. I think because I don't think everyone is trying to play the best possible game. I think that there are truly negative games.
Sam Harris is right. Morality doesn't come from ancient religious texts. It comes from real-world consequences, and we can observe and measure it. In fact, when you compare secular societies to religious ones, the data is clear. According to the 2021 World Happiness Report, the top 10 happiest countries, Finland, Denmark, Switzerland, Iceland, are also among the least religious. They're not using the Bible to navigate morality. They're using evidence-based policy, strong education, healthcare, and trust. Meanwhile, highly religious countries like Nigeria, Pakistan, or Venezuela often rank lower in human rights, gender equality, and democratic stability. That's not moral progress. That's what happens when religion dominates law instead of reason. And when Peterson calls religious stories deep moral pointers, we should ask, to what? The Bible is filled with genocide, slavery, misogyny. Leviticus demands death for adultery. Deuteronomy promotes ethnic cleansing. These aren't moral blueprints. They're Iron Age laws from tribal societies. What really works? Iterability, as Harris said. The ability to test a decision across different contexts. If a principle works across time, cultures, and outcomes, it's moral. That's what Harris calls the landscape of well-being. And it's not a theory. It's supported by moral psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral economics. For example, Paul Bloom's research at Yale shows infants have innate moral instincts, a preference for fairness and kindness, long before they're taught religion. Harvard's Joshua Green uses fMRI studies to show that moral decisions light up brain regions linked to empathy and prediction, not revelation. Steven Pinker showed in The Better Angels of Our Nature that as societies became more secular, violence dropped and human rights expanded. So no, morality isn't a religious story. It's a scientific, social, and evolutionary process. Religion didn't invent it. It just tried to control it. Your move. If we can use reason, data, and empathy to build a better world, do we really need a book that says women should stay silent and slaves should obey? Let us know what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let's keep going deeper.